Welcome to this edition of MDM Live, November 20th, 2020. My name's Tom Gale, and I'm the CEO of Modern Distribution Management. My co-host today is Mike Marks of Indian River Consulting Group. Welcome back,
Hey, Tom.
Mike.
Thanks, Tom.
Good to see you.
It's good to do these deals on a Friday.
Absolutely. I always look forward to them, so hope you do this too. In our program today, Mike and I are going to spend a little bit of time discussing how we see 2021 shaping up across a number of dimensions and what's kind of wrapping up this year. And after that, we will be joined by our guest, Dan Hill, CEO of Würth Industry North America, and we'll be talking with him for the remainder of our hour together. I'd like to first thank our sponsors of today's program. Epicor Software Corporation drives business growth by providing flexible, industry-specific software designed to fit the precise needs of manufacturing, distribution, retail, and service industry customers. With more than 45 years of experience, Epicor's customers' unique business processes and operational requirements are built into every solution in the cloud or on premises. With deep understanding of your industry, Epicor solutions dramatically improve performance and profitability while easing complexity so you can focus on growth. For more information, visit epicor.com/distribution. And I'm happy to welcome our other sponsor today, Magento Commerce. B2B commerce is undergoing a technological revolution. Changes in consumer technologies, audience demographics, and purchasing preferences is motivating many businesses to upgrade their legacy commerce platforms. Magento Commerce delivers unlimited scalability to help you satisfy consumer demand for convenience, flexibility, and choice. For more information, please visit magento.com. And with that, Mike, I wanted to kick this off. When we talked a little bit before, we have built our research and conference program for 2021. This will look familiar to many people because we've really formed a lot of our focus and industry coverage and research around all of these areas for many years. Of course, in 2020, they all took on a little bit different meaning.
Understatement of the year.
So with that, and just as an overview, what we'll be doing in terms of our conference schedule, and these will be one-day conferences where we have converted to virtual for now. We do hope in the fall, in November, to get together for our 5th annual Sales GPS conference and bring together that ongoing network and community that we've built around sales model transformation. But as a starting point in February, we're looking to hold an M&A conference for a day, and this is really timely. You know, we have no idea in terms of timing of recovery and where things might go, but you know, all of the consensus forecasts right now are really pointing to there's going to be some sort of a recovery in 2021, and likely, you know, that's going to start to hit in first quarter, second quarter. Again, timing, who knows? But based on all the pieces coming together, it's looking to be a fairly optimistic year. In many ways, it's hard to beat.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there?
Sorry.
What was that?
I think it was Siri talking to me.
Ah.
I'm not sure where she came from. Where I was going with that thought.
Well, don't you have some rough schedules for these things, don't you? Because I know the sales GPS thing was in November, but isn't the M&A thing coming up pretty quick?
At the end of February, we're going to be getting some save the dates and some information about that right after Thanksgiving. And then in April, we're looking to do a transformation future of work, really focusing on talent and what the talent shifts are taking place out there. That's really going to be the core focus of that one. Technology probably in June, I believe that's scheduled, and then analytics in early September. You know, all of these areas are changing so quickly in terms of the impact and the way people are leveraging them. I just want to come back and talk about these a little bit one by one with you, Mike, and get your take on some of them. So let's talk about M&A. I mean, this past week has been really interesting. The building materials industry, M&A there has really kicked in, and a number of big deals in terms of Home Depot acquiring HD Supply, US LBM being acquired by Bain Capital, Foundation Building Materials, Prime Source. A lot of deals are just really starting to take shape. I anticipate a lot more activity starting to ramp up here. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're going to have this M&A summit in February. Particularly when you take a look at across a lot of distribution sectors, many were struggling in 2020. Building materials was one of those that actually saw quite a spike as there was a lot more people. There was just a lot more spike in terms of construction activity, remodeling, and that type of thing. Just interested in your take in terms of where you see this cycle right now and where M&A might be going in 2021 from your perspective.
Well, I mean, as you know, I sit in several boards, and two of them are actively involved pursuing an acquisition right now. And the client base we work with, I think you're going to see a lot of activity for multiple reasons. If you're a public company, you got to generate growth. You don't have an option. And if you're in one of those markets, it's not going to give it to you. It's called about acquisition. The other thing is, I think on the distributor side, there are a lot of people that got through this. Okay. I mean, they're stressed. But when a distributor goes into a down market, they generate cash because you don't replace the inventory because your sales are down. You've collected receivables. There's no more sales. But when the market starts to come back is when you see most of the business failures because people run out of working capital. If you need, if I'm going to grow $1 million, I need another $250,000 in working capital, and I don't have it, and the banks don't want to give it to me. There's a lot of companies that I think they maybe not in the classic distress mode, but I think you're going to see a lot of activity because to me, we're not going to see a monolithic recovery. I mean, there are some people that have just had growth all the way through. There are other folks that are still augering in, and it kind of depends which subsegment you're in. I mean, you really have to look at this on a micro basis because some of the markets that our clients serve, same company, some of them are up, some of them are down, and it's going to be real goofy. There's an old saying, it said it's a salad dressing and an industrial lubricant, and people just kind of look at you funny, but I think it's going to be that kind of a year. I mean, there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of misinformation and everybody trying to figure it out. It's going to be very frothy.
Yeah, well, I think your comment about the fragmented nature of this is spot on. If you take a look at third quarter, it wasn't a monolithic recovery for all sectors, and that will absolutely continue. For some, there were a few V's, but more and more we're looking more like swooshes, and in some cases W's. So it's across the board, and like you say, it's going to continue that way. Let's jump. I just want to jump through each of these quickly so we can get to our conversation with Dan.
It raises the average IQ of our discussion when Dan comes in.
Absolutely. Transformation, future work. This is really going to focus on the fact that in some form or fashion, work in distribution has forever been changed. One of the key things we're going to focus on here in 2021 at this conference is really going to be around talent and how that is really shifting in terms of what it looks like. And I think you could look at some of these other areas that we have up here and say that I think that distributors are going to be looking into these areas specifically to try to build bench strength across the technology, digital aspects of what they're trying to do, analytics certainly. I think they're going to be bringing in all very different types of sales skills to support that as well. What are you seeing in terms of where people are shifting on this?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned from my son when he got out of college is that, because I gave him a speech about, you got to sit in a company for 5 years and have a baseline job experience. And if you're a job hopper, it doesn't work. And he called me a Triassic reptile. Because he said, the companies that do well attract the A players. A players like to work with A players. And if the A players leave, the company's not going to do well, you know. And I kind of go back to Brent Grover's deal, because I asked him when he sold his Jansan distributor, I mean, he did really well. I said, Brent, how do you get so much money? You know, why was it worth that much? And he said, Mike, all I did is I got the best people. Because I had the best people, I got the best customers. When I had the best customers, all the best suppliers wanted me, and the whole thing works. And so the big change, I think, in terms of future work, if you look at what Mark Dancer did in the Facing the Forces of Change, it's all about innovating and redesigning the jobs and putting it together. And some people can do this stuff remotely. I mean, there's so many, this whole thing about, you know, I'm doing you a favor, giving you a job and lifetime employment. I mean, these are old people like me that still think the world's that way. And it's about how do you create an employment experience that's got a competitive barrier. You get the best people, you're going to do well. I think it's really that simple.
Yeah. But what we've already seen too is that in many ways, the ability of people to work independently and as part of small teams very collaboratively and effectively.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've talked a little bit in past programs that we've done around this whole aspect around emotional intelligence in terms of ability to play well with other
Yeah.
people. It seems that that's going to elevate as well as we go forward.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and to me, that's the upside. I mean, it's how do you, so I now have an under 30-year-old mentor, not a mentee. This is somebody that's calling BS on my old codger stuff and saying that's the wrong way to look at it. And I mean, if you're a baby boomer, you really do need a mentor that's under 30, you know, just to try to figure out where this talent is.
Yeah. The last aspect on this I want to touch on is around training, because I think that regardless of company size, there's going to be more and more. It's already coming online, but in terms of putting the training pieces in here to really help people transition in terms of the skills and kind of the new skills that they need and the new ways to collaborate, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see a lot of that taking place and available in more companies taking advantage of that in terms of bringing in training to make sure they retain and keep uplifting the team that they do have. So I think training and online learning is going to get a shot in the arm in 2021. Technology. What can you say? So we have an advisory board and we had a call with them on Monday. And, you know, it was like technology, you know, no matter what aspect, you know, where I really see things developing here, in just taking the aspect of e-commerce is, you know, everybody's on this journey of one sort or another in terms of bringing up an e-commerce site, getting their data clean, bringing up an e-commerce site, you know, working on the product information, the content piece. To me, it feels like 2021, the customer experience is really going to be the place where there's going to be some competitive gaps created, because it feels to me like as people continue to bring in more self-serve and advance their e-commerce capabilities, which of course has exploded this year, that ability to give customers that seamless experience and connection in integrated way to interact with the sales teams that they're working with at a distributor, all of that is just going to rise in importance.
I had a conversation years ago with one of the senior scientists at IBM, and he made a very strong point. He said, we're analog beings living in a digital world. And right now we're getting lost in technologies. We're paying too much attention to it, because technology should allow us to enhance our ability to have meaningful relationships with people. You know, if you really, it's not about selling stuff in the web. It's about, like you say, customer journey. The customer wants the easiest thing. I mean, the new Gartner thing said that 44% of millennials would like to have a buying experience that does not involve a field salesperson.
Yeah.
I mean, there's limits to that, but I mean, it is going to be about customer experience.
Yeah. The final thing I want to talk about here is really analytics. And, you know, for me, the key point around that is I think 2021, you're going to see so much more where companies are going to be pushing out the analytic tools out to the front lines. Now that's going to take form in a lot of different ways. One of the key areas I think is in terms of sales teams, in terms of really giving them the kind of tools to work better, work smarter, have the kind of information, whether that's fed through a CRM by pulling in external market data to really get better ways to prospect and focus on customers with the highest potential. Yeah, all of these things I think are really going to accelerate as well in 2021.
I agree with you. And the thing is, it's really all about the money. I mean, right now, salespeople, when they back out of their driveway, they go left or right by the most recent irate phone call or text. And having the analytics helps you make a better decision about where you invest your time and your money. And those that do it, there'll be a bigger gap between them and the other folks that are trying to do the same things better instead of doing new things.
Yeah. And of course, all of these things are all wrapped together in many ways, and I know that we will be talking a lot more about those. But I'm really excited. Our teams have been working on this and already starting to form. We've got a number of research projects in the works, and a lot of programming and content around that we're building out for the year. So thanks for your takes on that, Mike. And with that, let me stop my share here and bring up Dan, and we can start our conversation there.
Very cool. Dan, you got to turn your video on. Oh, you already did.
He's there. And just a quick reminder, at any point, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your window, and we will do our best to get to it. And with that, Dan Hill, welcome. Thank
you very much. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. You, sir. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And let's just start things off. Give us a little information, a little background on yourself and on Würth Industry North America, please.
Sure, enjoy doing that. I want to first of all thank Mike for wearing Würth red today, so that's good. You're color coded correctly. We're happy to see that. Sure, give a little bit of overview on the Würth Group and then work our way down into Winna. So Würth Group is a $15 billion plus global distributor, the largest distributor of fasteners in the world, and 78,000 employees, and currently and still owned by Professor Würth, the Würth family. So it's still a family-run business. I think that's shocking. Professor just celebrated his 85th birthday, 75 years in the business, and just last week I had a number of meetings with Professor, so he's still actively involved in the business, and it's nice to see someone at that age so amazingly involved in the company that he started. So with that, Würth Industry North America is clearly a part of the group. Würth in the United States, in North America, is a $2.3 billion company. Few people realize how big we are in the United States, and Würth Industry North America itself is about $1 billion of that number. So, but it started here in the United States more than 40 years ago, and a collective of about 15 plus companies as part of the overall group, and about 2,000 employees, 100 plus locations across, again, North America. So a very, very strong company financially. This year in total, the Würth Group will generate, as I mentioned, about 15 billion in sales. So we'll be flat year on year, but we'll generate almost $1 billion in cash in total. So a strong performance in spite of the pandemic, and really puts us in a great spot for 2021. A little bit about myself. I've been with the Würth Group just about 2 years now, a little over 2 years, and been involved in global distribution now for just about 5 years. So previous to this, I spent time at Newark Electronics, Premier Farnell, and of course we sold that business for just under $1 billion to Avnet. And I had a desire to get back into what I would say family distribution. And so the Würth Group came calling, and it worked out very well. Prior to that, I spent another time with a family-run business, an owned business, is Crescent Electric Supply Company. Spent almost 8 years there with the Crescent Group, and became the general manager and in charge of the P&L for those 100 plus locations. And then prior to that is where I started my career. It's interesting, Mike, you talk about that advice of giving and staying somewhere 5+ years. I did that at GE. I call it my raised by wolves years.
Yes, it was. Absolutely. You got the combat infantry medal, man.
I learned so much there. Distribution at GE is quite a fun time. And of course, I was involved in the sale of GE Supply at the time to Rexel. So that was an interesting one too. So acquisitions have been a part of my life, whether I like it or not, for quite a bit of it. But hopefully that's a good introduction, and we'll get it started there.
Yeah. Well, just to dive in a little bit in terms of the nature of the business, and this goes back because the original platform company actually was Adams Nut and Bolt out of Minneapolis, I believe, and then expanded from there. But I happen to know the company pretty well when I was back in Minneapolis. But it's really the core has been around fastening and fastening systems and supply, a lot of just in time, I know. But it's also expanded quite a bit. Can you just talk a little bit in terms of kind of core customer segment served and what that looks like?
Sure. Probably the best way to share it is we initially started with Adams, as you mentioned, and then we decided to become more of an MRO, industrial supply, not just only fasteners. So this year, our largest growth segment will be the industrial piece and PPE. And as I mentioned, we started as doing an acquisition strategy of acquiring these companies and leaving more as a portfolio, where the strategy now over the past 2 years is, as we work through acquisitions, we're streamlining to become a company rather than 15 companies. So we'll still continue to keep the names and the brands that are important, but we've never and previously leveraged the size and scope of our spend and resources. So as I mentioned, on the PPE industrial side, we generated more than 80,000 plus customers this year in total. So a customer growth of over 10%. From a sales growth standpoint, we'll end up just about on par here in the United States with last year. But we've seen, exponential operating result improvement. We'll have about an OR improvement of about 35% this year. So as the company continues to morph, and I feel like we're really well positioned for next year. We've gone through the business transformation process really the last 2 years, and we can spend some more time on that. But really, the company seeks to be, a known entity brand in the United States, which we haven't really focused on that previously. So we implemented a very strong marketing campaign, digital campaign, and that's part of the reason why I'm on with you guys today. Is that we want to continue to get the word out there on Würth and the red trucks. So
yeah, well, thank you very much. And I definitely want to come back to the business transformation piece, but can you talk a little bit about in terms of this year and sort of the transition that you've been making and how your team's been doing?
Sure. I don't think anybody ever plans a pandemic for a pandemic in March. So that was an interesting one to add onto my LinkedIn profile, I think. Survived. I probably shouldn't count it as yet, though. I guess I still have another 6 weeks to make it through. Really, this process for us, and I'll share this with it this way, is that we were very disjointed here in this marketplace. So you have these independent companies operating on their own, and really we wanted to take and squash that down into a very low layer of management staff. So we went from having a lot of management staff to a smaller management staff, and a staff that works together as an entire group rather than siloed in individual companies. And that's part of the transformation process that we did last year. So it put us in an excellent spot that when the pandemic did hit, we were already accelerating through that phase, right? So it allowed us to be able to facilitate a much quicker response time in individual companies. And I will say this, I'm very proud of my team, very proud of the fact that we're an essential business and service other essential businesses. But of our 100 plus locations during the pandemic, we've kept every single one of them open. So we didn't lose a single day servicing customers. And that says a lot, I think, for our staff. It says a lot for, our focusing on the customer side. And we really wrote our own policies and procedures on how we could safely return to work and keep people in a good spot servicing customers and not jeopardize the supply chain. And part of that discussion point relative to your question, Tom, is, we felt very strongly too that we felt that this is going to be a bump in the road and not a spike. So we were very surgical in the way that we worked through furloughs. We did not have a mass layoff. And as I mentioned before, having the parent ship in Germany generate $1 billion in cash allows you to put a lot of money in inventory. So we still, we have just about $250 million worth of inventory in the United States alone. So from that standpoint, when the spigot came back on, we still had people and we still had product. And that really allowed us to accelerate. And quite frankly, I think we gained quite a bit of share, not only in Q3, but here in Q4. But that was a long answer to your question, but I like to hear myself talk every now and then.
Well, but it was a perfect answer in terms of basically how you navigated through, something that nobody had ever faced. But it sounds like pretty quickly you were able to get future focused and really create a nice strategy in terms of keeping things moving forward very quickly.
Yes, thank you.
Dan, it's Mike. I'm really interested, like when you first went into Würth, and I know I know a lot of the companies you've been with before, so I know you've stepped into a couple cow pies that you've had to fix along the way. But how did you decide that it was time to do a transformation? Was this something you went around, met everybody, and you said it's not right? I mean, was the team pushing you for change? Was the owner pushing? I mean, how did that whole thing get started?
Well, it's a great question, Mike. When the group first called and discussed the opportunity, I was very skeptical about the opportunity because the Würth Group, as I shared, has not been very strong in the United States, or certainly not as strong as it could be. And I went through a series of interviews and discussions, and then I got a note that Professor Würth wanted to meet me, and that would I fly to Germany and meet with Professor. And so I flew to Germany, and I spent two and a half hours with him and Bettina Würth, his daughter, she's chairperson of the board. And we spent more than 2 hours in discussion. And I know it was an interview, but it certainly didn't feel that way. You have one of the most brightest minds ever, entrepreneurially speaking, in Professor Würth. And he talked about his frustration in the United States, that he'd been successful everywhere around the globe, 400 plus companies, $15 billion in sales, but he still felt that he was not successful as yet in the United States, and that there was plenty of opportunity for growth in that marketplace. And he asked me a lot of questions about my family. I'm a father of 4. I've got 4 children and been married 22 plus years. And the conversation went along the lines of him and his family, and the importance of making sure that the business continues to grow and prosper. And when you have that type of conversation, an opportunity, I just looked at him directly and said, it's pretty clear that what has been going on in the market in the US, North America, you're not happy with, but will you be able to release control, for lack of a better term, and allow someone to help fix that business? Because if you're looking for a caretaker or looking for somebody just to make minor changes, I'm not the right person to do that. Mike, I love cow pies. Cow pies.
I love it. Go, man.
I made a 24-year career of cow pies. I enjoy business transformation. I enjoy, putting together fantastic teams and changing the business. So Professor was 100% behind it. And before I left, he nodded at me and said, "Hey, I'd really like you to run North America for us." And I said, "Well, thank you." I was very grateful. Certainly, it was funny because that was my first interview in Germany. I had like 7 more to do over a course of 2 days. And I started laughing.
It's a German company. Yeah.
Yes, I started laughing. I'm like, I've already started with Professor. He seems to be sold on the whole idea. But it was a great exchange, and it gave me a lot of confidence. So I came back home and I talked it over with Sarah and our family. I like global distribution. Distribution's in my entire career. I've been through the electrical side. I've been through electronics, and now the C parts. I wanted to be a part of a global business that had the money. In the previous cow pies, a lot of times you're trying to put stuff together with toothpicks and popsicle sticks.
Yeah.
Or you're putting together a business plan that's 75 pages to get a $3 investment.
Yeah.
Felt the Würth family wanted to grow here and definitely make a difference. So it's a long answer again to your question, but that's how the transformation started. So when I joined the company, and I did my rounds, I still spend 70% of my time plus on the road. It's important. Last year I was laughing. Someone asked me about my flight schedule this year compared to last year. So I did over 150 plus flights last year, flight legs, and I was to Germany 17 times. And this year I've not been to Germany at all. But I've driven more miles on this car than I ever have in the previous 5 years. So I'm based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and I've always jumped in an aircraft and flown somewhere. But this year, jumping in the car and driving to Adams all the way up in Minneapolis, you know, a 12, 13-hour drive. And it's been a change for sure. But after you did the rounds, you could sense in the organization that there was a level of frustration that what could we be if we worked together as a unit? What could we be in the marketplace? I mean, I'm not.
So are you saying that after you did the visits, there was already energy or frustration with where they were? It wasn't like they were confident you were screwing them up.
Well, you always get and you know, I hear this anytime you change industries. Well, you're not from this industry.
Right.
And you don't know, and of course, everybody has the special customers, the special suppliers, the special supply chain, and nothing overlaps, even though we're still with customers, vendors, suppliers.
Right.
Okay. So you go through that piece, which always takes a period of time, where everybody does think you're full of garbage, and because you didn't come from this industry. But there was already in the ranks a desire to see what the company could be if we worked together as a company, rather than just, you know, 15 individual operating companies. So, and quite frankly, our German colleagues, Würth Industry Service, has done exactly that. I mean, they are one of the cornerstone companies in the Würth Group. I call it the European shared services model. They did a fantastic job with shared services. And so it wasn't like there was a blueprint here that, you know, you had to draw it all up again. It was a matter of, hey, it's a matter of execution and who's who and wants to drive the progress forward in the company. So definitely an impetus for people that wanted some change. I don't know they wanted this much change, but we gave them some.
So Dan,
go ahead, Tom.
well, I was just going to ask Dan to talk a little bit more about the business transformation aspect of when he came in and sort of where that's come to this year as well.
Sure. I mean, so on my first day of the job, I walked in and I said, I'd like to meet, you know, the following groups. So I said, I'll use an example, marketing. I said, I'd like to sit down and meet with our marketing group. And I had given this list ahead of time. And so at 11 o'clock, this person walks in and I say, okay, what was our marketing spend last year? And it was near zero. And then the answer was, okay, so how many people in your group? And this person looks at me and said, I spend half of my job is working on marketing and the other half is doing sales and support service. So I'm sitting here going in my head, oh dear Lord, you know, we're a billion company, and I have half of a marketing person. And I always look at it this way: is fractional resources give you fractional results. So today in that same marketing team now, I think we're up to 14 people. So been super aggressive on our social media side and adding marketing. And so that we actually are generating leads now because of our marketing presence, right? And I can give you time and again an example. I said, okay, can someone give me a list of all of our locations? Blank stare. We don't have a list like that. I said, well, I mean, I need to know all the leases and all the information and together, and like, we don't have that. Well, now we have a person who runs, our CDCs and responsible for facilities across the entire, United States. And we make a very strong focus in on buying and leasing on facilities. But I could go through example by example that on the transformation side, where you just had a lot of these individual companies who've been extremely successful and managed through lots of tough times, were siloed, completely siloed. Right? So as we've transformed and worked through the process, there's strength in numbers. And rather than acting like the 14 colonies, the United States, it's a different play.
So one question, because one of the things when you talk about a strong shared services model, if you're going from silos to really looking at the productivity and the effectiveness improvements, you're forced to be dependent on other people. And a lot of folks in silos, even if the situation's bad, I have control over my resources. And there are a lot of things that we've been doing with clients, and in terms of like our sales GPS with sales transformation, it's hard to get people that used to have their little department or their silo to be willing to be dependent. Have you run into that? Do you have any advice on how somebody deals with that?
I can share with you some of my thoughts on it. I don't know if it'd be necessarily advice, but part of that is, people involved in the silos need to be a part of the solution. So the way that I've always approached it is, here's this problem we're trying to deal with. Especially when you're brought in as a new person to try to change a business. I find those answers of change and those answers for opportunity to move forward and move the business forward reside with the current people in those roles. And so it's the conversation with them to ask that question of, if this were your company, how would you run it? Well, golly, I don't know why we do this. Why do we do this? Well, why are we doing those 5 or 6 things? And then so you can take, and I think that you can tap into people's energy that way, right? So they're a part of the solution, they're part of the plan. And not only that, the discretionary time people waste in a day is enormous, right?
Yeah.
So, especially now today where we're all Zooming. I'm assuming that we're Zooming 8 hours a day, but I have no idea Zooming 8 hours a day. But tapping into that discretionary energy, Mike, I think is so important. And every organization has it, and it can be multiplicative in the results and the productivity. So, and how does it become multiplicative? If I decide not to take 3 extra breaks during the day or read my paper 15 minutes longer at lunch, those all transform the company bit by bit, and not needing to add additional headcount, not needing to add additional productivity. So you come to those tables and you have those round table discussions, and hey, this is a family business, and many of the businesses that we've acquired are family businesses. And to have that conversation of, what are the areas that we want to preserve? What are the areas that are very important to the culture of those individual companies? And what are the areas that we can change and we can morph and we can move to? And what you quickly find out is who's scalable and who's not scalable. So you'll have people that will say, wow, I've always wanted to run X, Y, and Z. And I'm a big believer that people that enjoy what they do at work are fulfilled, not only personally and professionally, but also more active in that process, right? So when you had a conversation of, Mike, what would you really like to do? Well, I really enjoy doing podcasts. Well, then why are you on inside sales? We'd much rather have you do a podcast on products. And the next thing you know, you're moving people around, and the overall productivity of the company just continues to escalate. So
one of the things I'm taking away, and by the way, I think that is very useful, by the way, Dan, is that you use the energy they had and their frustration, and you let that set a lot of the priorities early. So if somebody wanted to do this is how I capture that discretion. I give them what they want because it moves us in the right direction. Did I understand that right?
Perfectly. I worked for a CEO, a Scotsman. His name was Graham Macbeth, and Graham Macbeth was a fantastic mentor to me. And he used to talk about the big rocks, right? Focusing on the big rocks. Businesses can't focus in on 23 things. Pick the 4 or 5 items and make sure that you work on those. And once you finish those items, then you move on. And so in this type of a business, to your point, you quickly identify the big rocks. All right. What do we need to do? What is the most important items? And people rally around that. I think in general, people want to come to work every day and make a difference. So if you can generate a communication plan that shows this is the areas that we're going to work on, this is the way in which you can help, people get on board quickly, and it can push. And that's really, I think, we were very blessed to make it through the pandemic the way that we have. But we see a really bright future ahead because, again, we're in transformation and we're still plowing through.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, Tom and I have been saying that this pandemic's had us, we've made 5 years of innovation progress in 5 months, just because we didn't have another alternative.
Yes, I would agree with that for sure.
So,
And
sorry,
that's
Tom, I didn't mean to dominate, but
No.
I just got curious.
That's fine. That's a great way to segue actually into, Dan, I'm interested in hearing sort of how you're looking at 2021 and sort of what's on your plate in terms of moving things forward.
So our strategy for 2021 is very similar to what our strategy was in 2020 and 2019. Our goal is to double the business by 2025. So, we want to double the size of the company. And this year, as I said, we'll be just about flat to last year. So that means we're going to have to accelerate a little bit stronger here in 2021. I noticed your piece in the M&A side. You know, we've already done one acquisition this year. We're hoping to get through another two that this year in 2020, and that will definitely be a focus for us again in 2021. Is looking for those companies that fit well geographically and are part of our bolt-on strategy. So a good example, you know, last year we purchased Fasco, which Fasco is a stainless steel supplier. Stainless steel supplier, merged it perfectly with Marine Fasteners, which one of our companies, and that generates substantial growth just through a quick acquisition like that. So we're going to continue to look at those targets. Techno Tool is a good example of working that in a quick bolt-on for OVH, for Oliver Van Horn. And we're going to continue to look for those opportunities throughout the industry. Our pipeline of acquisitions is quite robust right now. It's been nice. We started that process a little more than a year ago of proactively reaching out. It takes the industry a little while to figure out, are you real or not? And when you have the amount of cash that we do, be able to sit down and say, we can pay you in cash and do it tomorrow makes a big difference than people that are trying to find financing. So that's growth through acquisition. And then the second component is organic growth. And this year alone, we generated $76 million of new contracts. And that's just for an individual year. Those are multiple year contracts that'll go on. Huge opportunities, huge wins for us at major customers. And we've looked to during the pandemic, it created a great opportunity for us strategically to extend contracts. So even contracts that still had 24 months left, we went and sat down with those customers via Zoom, because everybody else was bored, right? You know, and said, well, here's the opportunity. Why don't we look at extending this contract for 3 to 5 years? So we really felt like we protected our flank on customer losses, no major customer losses. So the 3 ways again for 2021, you know, organic growth through making sure we have new customers, new opportunities, and the pipeline is full right now. Mergers, and really say acquisitions. And then the third component is protecting your overall base and making sure that we're not getting ourselves in trouble in the back door.
It would seem, it would seem to me that coming from the silo structure, because the one nice thing about the silo structure is people were very focused on a well-defined customer base, that as you bring in these other companies, there's probably a lot of cross-selling opportunities. They bring in new products to sell to different people. Is that one of the benefits that comes in terms of fueling organic?
And that's part of that. And it's a double play. You hit on some concentric circle type discussion, right? So you're buying the company or one of these companies, both for talent acquisition, the geographic position, and then from a vendor standpoint. So we have added a couple of new vendors through that acquisition model. And then our product team's been very aggressive this year. We've signed a number of new vendors in 2020 that will continue to ramp up in 2021. Mark Forged, for example, our partnership with Mark Forged, a 3D printing manufacturer, has been wonderful. You know, would we ever thought that we'd be selling the number of 3D printers? So last year, at this point in time, we had 1 person on 3D. This year at this time, we have 9 people on 3D. So,
wow.
So it's a tremendous, and quite frankly, the business plan is to add another 4 people in 2021. So we're looking for those opportunities geographically, as I said, but also the new vendor space is exactly the point. So we'll make an announcement later this month too. We'll be taking back into the Winna Group another Würth company just for that very reason, because it makes sense with the existing customer base and the cross-selling.
Right.
So yeah, you're exactly right.
It sounds like you got a really fun hand to play. I mean, that you had the energy, people wanted to do things, and it looks like if you get a bunch of energy, you turn into a cat herder, I guess, more than an executive almost.
That's two analogies. We got cow pies and cat burglars. And
sorry.
That's what Mike is here for.
Well, I will tell you this, is that, you know, there are some Fridays I do feel guilty taking that check. You know, this looks like fun.
Well, but you're the caretaker. Once a company gets that kind of energy and people start to feel that win, because distributors never stay the same. They're either dying or winning. And once that thing starts to spool up, you fundamentally have to protect it because it doesn't stay on autopilot.
No, there's no Ron Popeil in this business. There's no set. This is definitely something, and that's, we had a staff meeting this morning, and everything that we were talking about in the staff meeting was 22 and 23. And I said to myself, when we got here, we were talking about the 90s and the 80s being the good old years. So to get on a staff meeting today, and I don't really run those staff meetings anymore. The staff runs the meetings, and they publish the agenda, and we cover those topics, right? And I would sit there. I said, man, I got to take a process time out here. I said, this is unbelievable. I said, all the topics are related to years upcoming and not now. And I said, my goodness, before you'd get an agenda, Mike and Tom, that was 3 pages long of the houses on fire. We got fires on the first floor. We got fires on the second floor. We got just mass chaos. And where are you going to send folks to put out the fires? So it's very encouraging. It says a tremendous amount about the team and the Würth culture, and the investment by the Würth family. It just speaks volumes to what you can do when people believe. So, and again, even in a tough year, I feel like we got a little bit robbed this year because of the pandemic. I wonder what we could have had this year. I'm going to take what we can get, but we're never going to be happy, right?
That's part of the deal, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the other aspect here, well, there's 2 pieces, Dan, on what you talk about, and is that those companies that went into this year with a healthy balance sheet were in a great spot to very quickly shift forward and move forward. So that, there are a lot of companies in this 3rd and 4th quarter that are still a little bit gridlocked in terms of kind of figuring out. It's the markets are still so uncertain. And to have that kind of a meeting and just the power of the energy of your team that you speak to is a fantastic place to be going into 2021. A quick reminder that if you have a questions here for Dan, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the window. I'd be happy to field those. And Dan, I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about international distribution and what that looks like. I'm just really interested. Historically, there has been a number of European companies, whether it's Sonopar, and there's a handful of other ones that have come over here. Eric's is another one, certainly, and Würth is among those who have come over and really built out pretty comprehensive businesses in the different verticals. And Premier Farnell's another one, and certainly I guess I'd just like your take and perspective of operating in it quite a bit of where is this going? What do you see happening in the next few years?
It's a great question. I'll speak to my own experience. The first 2/3 of my career was spent just here in the United States, and then as you start looking at greater opportunities to expand in the global piece, we're a part of a global network now, and I think that sometimes that's hard to reconcile if you've only been in the United States and you've only been in the U.S. distribution. There's a whole big wide world out there, and if you're a distribution junkie like I am, distribution runs 24/7. And that's been probably the most exciting part, Tom, is that, I had an opportunity to I was asked by a colleague to give a presentation to his sales team. And, the call started at 1:30 in the morning. This was last Thursday. And I looked just like this at 1:30 in the morning. And I was laughing to myself saying, you could have never done this 10 years ago, never saw this. But here was the whole sales audience. It was, we had, I think it was about 800 people on the phone that morning. But to open a call up to say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, it's exhilarating, right? And so if you look at the Würth Group, and I'll speak to that experience, or we did Premier Farnell. Premier Farnell, obviously UK-based company, and I always laugh that we were separated by a common language. Here you are, you go to a meeting and like, oh my gosh, this I guess is English. But an opportunity to understand that there's commonalities of each market and each business, and there's things that we should keep together, and there's things that we should separate, right? So I look at this, the Würth Group, the German model relative to the way that they're doing it with one single, million square foot facility won't work in the United States. You just can't do it with one facility. However, what you can look at and say is 110 plus locations. Is that maybe too many locations? Should we have larger hubs? Should we have bigger CDCs? And so what from my standpoint is I've traveled the globe and I've spent time. I actually just last year we opened up a 1 million square foot facility in China, and spending time in China. I spent time in India. Look at it, the opportunity to be able to work your global network for customer service is so important. So when I came on, my counterpart, Rainer Burkert, runs the Würth Industry Service in Germany, been with the company for 28 years. I said, you're going to be my best friend. And he said, I'm not sure that's the case. I said, Rainer, not only are we going to drink German beer and eat pretzels together, but we're going to do lots of business together. So of that $76 million of the business that we've generated this year, more than half of that is international business. You start lining up and lining up from my standpoint, I think it's a sweet spot for us as the Würth Group is I want companies that have facilities in the United States, but I also want companies that have not only that, but also facilities in the globe, right? So we have, like I said, 8,000 employees. We have literally operating 400 different companies. To get a customer solution that way is just unbelievable. So we were on a call, the other morning, it was another call. I had a person from Shanghai, Thailand, Australia, and Germany, and we're talking to a customer that was here in the US and said, where do you want us to cover? And we kept up the map and showed our overlay, right? Huge overlay when you want to be a global company. And that's a differentiator that we really hadn't marketed very well in the past, that as a distributor, we can service you everywhere and we're going to give you that same experience and feel at all those locations, regardless of what country you're in. I probably went long on that answer. You guys need a stop sign for me. I get wound up.
No. Well, it's easy to be. It's good to be. It's Friday afternoon. I mean, that's this global's challenging to a lot of the sort of lifestyle distributors here in North America. They may have a handful of locations, and the owner of the capital is the chief executive, and they've kind of, they talk about we've been here for 50 years. So I'm looking for a piece of advice from you based on your scar tissue that you've accumulated with cow pies. And if what advice would you have for that owner operator who says in their own mind, you know what, I don't want to just sell this thing and get out. What I want to do is I want to go through a transformation, but everybody's so stuck that we've done it this way forever. And I was been the leader that sort of did it. How do you actually start?
That's a great question. It's probably one that we might need to lay down on the couch to answer, because I think a lot of that, it's a lot of it's psychology of the human brain, right?
Yeah.
And we talked through that very difficult conversation about shelf lives of prior owners. So we acquire businesses, and the owner's still in that company. If the owner doesn't want to change, though, it doesn't matter that you've acquired that company. So as the individual owners, they have to choose change. And if they don't choose change, to your point earlier, you're either going to grow or die, right? Yeah. And I think you have a lot of distributors that are in that spot right now, that they have to make a decision. I think the pandemic has forced that equation. Some of the lifestyle businesses, lifestyle distribution businesses, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's really hard to survive a 2-year pandemic, I should say, which is a panic. In that type of scenario. So the day and age of having 8 or 10 good customers and trying to ride them out in the age of digitization and in the age of globalization, I think is really hard. So the answer to your question is psychologically, they have to choose change. And from that standpoint, you got to surround yourself with a bunch of team members who want to accelerate that change in the business. And that could be the hardest point, is that people have to get on the bus. And if they don't want to get on the bus, it's okay to leave somebody at the last bus station, right? If you articulate the vision of change and you've articulated that you want to move the company forward as an owner, and you have a bunch of people that say, hey, I'm not interested in doing that. I like my status quo. I always laugh at that. For example, putting in a CRM. We didn't have a CRM here. You have the Salesforce that says, hey, listen, I'm not using a CRM. I'm going to quit. And I laugh and say, we were like the last people in the universe that didn't have a CRM. Anywhere you go, you're going to have a CRM, right? Yeah. In systemization. So, we've moved to WS1. When I first joined the company, we had less than 20% of our sales and our inventory on a single system. By the end of Q1 2021, we'll have 90% of our sales and inventory on the same system.
Wow.
Yes. So
that's huge.
That's been a major endeavor. And if we hadn't had really bright IT people on the Würth Industry side and really bright, folks at the individual operating companies, we'd never be there. But to have a standard data layer set, to have a BI team, all those are components to answer your question, Mike, and on how do you get to that transformation, on how do you start it, how do you jumpstart it? Those are all important pieces.
Yeah, and a couple of quick questions, and then I want to get to this BI team and the digitization aspect before we leave, and we've got about 4 minutes. How many employees in U.S. and North America total?
So in total for the Würth Group in North America, we're roughly just about 7,000 employees in the U.S. Würth Industry in North America, which is just my portion of that group, is about 2,500, roughly.
Great, thank you. And just to kind of finish off here, can you talk a little bit about the digitalization effort that's going on? And also, I know that you just mentioned in terms of the business intelligence team.
Yes, I had a great opportunity in my experience, and you go through these cow pies, as you said, Mike, and you learn. You also continue to learn and develop yourself as a leader. Is really got exposed in the business analytics side. We did sales operation at Crescent, and we started that group. And then when I went to Premier Farnell and Newark, really an advanced business team, business analytics, business intelligence team, quite advanced because more than 90% of your orders are bought and shipped same day. So you have to really have the pulse on the customer. When I came here to Newark, I asked about from Newark to here at Würth, I asked about, do we have a team like this, like we had at Newark here? Nothing. The business analytics team, the business intelligence team really allows you to see around corners. And they're your good cop and they're your bad cop. And they're both. So now we built that team up to be about 4 people now that are really looking at trends and inventory usage, inventory reductions, looking at trends on where we should be from a new facility standpoint, how we should aggregate our data. We have a standard data layer set. They built our standard data layer set. We did not have a standard data layer set at all. So it's really hard to aggregate your volume when you don't have a standard data layer set. So that team has been instrumental in the change in helping those big rocks that we focused in on, of making good decisions. So you're no longer just making gut decisions. You come in, the data is in front of you, and boy, it makes it a lot easier to make a decision if you've got 16 arrows pointing in one direction.
Yeah.
So, what other digitalization in terms of what role has that played in terms of e-commerce this year and going forward?
Sure. I mean, our largest e-commerce site this year generated an additional 10,000 new customers for us during the pandemic. Digital play will continue to be a part of it, especially, and I don't want to get into proprietary stuff, but the way in which we're measuring our digital Kanban with the 3D printing is also, for me, I look at that as a huge digitization change where we're able to sit with customers and actually print parts is pretty unbelievable. And I know we're running up on the time here.
We are, so I'm just going to wrap up here. And Dan, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Appreciate your time. Wish you the best of luck and a happy Thanksgiving to you. Mike, we will be back here in December with our final 2020 program and look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you, guys. Dan, thank you so much, man. It was a hoot. We could have obviously gone longer.
Really appreciate the time and being invited. And again, just want to give a quick shout out to my team. Thanks for all the hard work, and everyone have a healthy and safe Thanksgiving. Take good care now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.